Now that we understand how to generate an Express app using the Express generator, and we've walked through the folder and file structure and introduced ourselves and become familiar with the folder structure, which gives us a good organization for our project, as well as what each of the files do with a focus on routes and routers and how they help us fulfill HTTP requests that come in from our server. We're now going to see how we can run this application how do we get this web server up and running on our machine, and then how can we make requests to it as we're developing locally so that we can build our application out. Now, the real easy thing here is that in our package.json, we can see that there is a Npm Start command which will automatically execute node./bin/ww, which means it will automatically pass our www, which is our execution point, into our application. It'll automatically pass that to node and begin to spin up a node process, provide us that awesome JavaScript execution environment, and begin to execute our server. And then within our server, we'll have that Express application running and responding to all HTTP requests that come in. To do that, really all we've got to do is open up a terminal within our application. So we'll go ahead and open up a new terminal. And when we open a terminal inside of our Visual Studio Code, it will open it in the root of our project and make that the root for our application. And then we can just go ahead and type npm start, and it will kick off starting up our application. Now in this case, we got some errors here in our application, and that is because we have not installed all of our dependencies. Here you can see that our application is dependent on a few third-party packages. The most important one here is Express. Now we went through, after we created the project, we went through and talked about all the folders and files, but we never did install all of the modules that we need or that we depend on. So we need to do an npm install first and foremost, and let npm reach out and pull down and install all of our dependencies that we have. Now that all of our dependencies are installed, we should be able to go ahead and run our application now. So let's go ahead and do that. Npm start. Oh, we're getting an error again. And here we see that we've got an issue inside of our app.js on line 25. Now this might have happened when we started messing around with adding that new project, and we can see that instead of typing use, I typed user on accident. So let's go ahead and save and fix that bug. But you can see a lot of bugs can be caused just by simple typos. Let's do an npm start. All right. No errors. It looks like Node is running, and we should be able to get to that inside of our browser. And if we remember correctly, when we look at our bin.ww file, we should see that we should be running on port 3000 on our local machine. So let's go ahead and see if we can pull that up in our browser. So let's do localhost, and we're going to do port 3000. Now, if you haven't done this before, localhost is a built-in redirect domain that our computer understands, that whenever it sees a local host instead of www.google.com or something like that, it knows that really we're just going to redirect back to our own machine, meaning that we are really just trying to get to our own machine. And this is really useful for developers. So let's go ahead and hit enter. All right. Localhost, we can see that we are now in our Express app. And the cool thing here is that we are getting back full-blown HTML. We've got a doc type HTML, we've got our header with the name of our application, and then our body has an H1 with Express and a welcome to Express. If we go back here and we look at, let's go ahead and close all really quick. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this terminal so it's not in our way. Now, when we originally looked at how this all worked, we looked at our index route, and whenever anybody calls for the index of our application, which is right here with no path on the end of it, or just a slash on the end of it, let's go ahead and put this down. We know that our router is actually handling that. And when we talked about it, we talked about the fact that response.render, whenever render gets called, Express knows that we're trying to use a view engine to compile HTML and send that HTML out to the client that made the request, in this case, our browser. And it is asking for the index page or the index HTML. And we talked about the fact that this object right here, this JavaScript object, is being passed into the view renderer as a variable or a property that we can use inside of our HTML. And this is really cool because this particular object allows us to push dynamic data into HTML and have it be rendered dynamically instead of having it hard coded into our HTML like we would in a static HTML website. So here it's calling for the index. So let's go look at the index view, which is right here, this index.jade. Extends layout, block content, and here we can see this H1 and this p tag. And if we go back to our HTML right here, we can see we've got an H1 and a p tag. Well, the question is, where does all this other content come from? Where do we get the doc type and the actual HTML and the head tag and the body? Where is that all coming from if it's not here inside of our partial view? Well, that is because we have the ability to have a primary layout or a primary HTML layout in which dynamic content can be injected. And so that's what makes up our view. And so here, if we look at this layout document right here, which is what's referenced right here, we can see that all of our HTML is actually in here in Jade. As we can tell, this isn't full HTML, otherwise we'd have a bunch of greater than, less thans, and of course opening and closing tags. Instead, we have just the HTML element name. Here we've got doc type, we've got HTML, we've got a head with a title and a link, and then a body. And we've got all of those right here. And then inside of the head, you can see we've got a title that gets injected, and we see that title right here where it says Express. And so that's being injected as the title of our page, which we can see up here in our browser tab. And then we are also seeing that this index partial is actually being injected into the layout, and it gets injected right here where this block content is at. So block content is right here, block content. And so wherever this appears and this appears, the content following it will be injected in its place into this page. So it's really cool. These view rendering engines are really cool. So if we don't want to call it Express, because this is really not an Express app anymore, it's our custom app, we can go ahead and change this to my app. Or to be more specific, Tim's app. And then when we go ahead and restart our server by doing a Control-C and then doing Npm Start again, now when we go to our page and we reload it, instead of it saying Express, we have dynamically put in Tim's app into that. And you can see that that variable, title, holds the value Tim's app, just like any other JavaScript variable would, and we can use that variable anywhere within our layouts. Now we'll get deeper into Jade layouts and how they work and how we can generate HTML pages that are dynamically created later. Right here, I just really wanted to show that our application is now running and it is now responding to any requests that come in from our browser through this localhost redirect as our domain and listening on port 3000 on our machine. And through that response, we are getting back that index. Now we also saw that when we looked at products, this new router that we added on our own, we did have a base path handler, right? It handles the base path for the products path. So if we go back to our app.json or the app.js, we can see for products, we've got this base path, right, where we've got this base route called /products. and then anything after /products is handled inside of our router. Well, we do have one for this, and here instead of using render, so we're not using the rendering engine, we're just going to send back plain text. So let's go ahead and make a call to /products with a slash on the end of it, which is of course our root path. Hit enter, and we will see we've got no products yet, come back later. And if we look at our application here, although we did not call response.render, our Express application went ahead and still wrapped this plain text inside of HTML for us. And we've got ourselves just no products yet, come back later inside of HTML. And actually, we were just sending back just straight text. So let's go look at our network. Let's reload the page, pull this up, and look at this /products get request. We can see that what came back from the actual application was just plain text. So that actually tells us that the HTML that was generated right here really wasn't generated by Express or our application. It was actually wrapped by Google Chrome all by itself. Google Chrome wrapped it in some generic HTML so that it could display it in our page, and that our Express app really did just send back plain text, which we can see right here. Because our response, had it been dynamically generated HTML by our Express app, it would be wrapped in all kinds of HTML tags. Just like this, if we go back here and we request just our slash, and then we look at our localhost request, and then we look at our response, you can see this is a full HTML document, which was generated by our Express app. Whereas our /products, let's go back to that one, inside of its response was just straight text. So Google Chrome is actually the one that is wrapping our plain text into HTML just so it can display it nicely inside of our browser. Right, so that is an introduction to running our application, getting our application running, and then going into how some of these route requests in our URL based on the paths that come in on our URL are handled by our routers, and how we can send back different information based on what we use on our response. If we use response.render, it's going to use the view generator, and it's going to use all of our templated HTML right here to generate HTML. If we use just send, it is going to send back just plain text. And then there are some other ones that we can use, like response.json, which will send back JSON information. And we're going to go ahead and wrap it up right there with the reminder that to stop your server, you do a Control-C. So once you're inside your terminal, you do a Control-C, and that will stop the service from running. And then to start our server, we do Npm Start, and that'll start back up our server.